Hello, everyone. Welcome back to today's story. In this episode, after days of calling James without a single response, Diep's strength gradually collapsed. She visits her uncle, hoping to hold herself together. But the moment she sees him, all her bottled-up fears break into tears. She confesses everything: how she can't reach James, how her heart feels empty, and how she no longer has the motivation to keep living without him. This episode dives deep into her loneliness, her fragile hopes. Stay until the end, because this chapter shows how even in the most hopeless moments, one sincere embrace, one comforting voice, can become the lifeline that keeps someone standing. And don't forget to subscribe to help us reach 10,000 subscribers. Your support truly means the world to us. The late afternoon sunlight drifts softly through the rows of trees that line the narrow village road, painting everything in a warm, honey-colored glow. Diep walks slowly toward Uncle's front yard, her steps heavy as if every memory she carries adds another stone to her chest. As she reaches the gate, she pauses for a long moment, drawing in a shaky breath before calling out gently, but loudly enough for the whole house to hear. "Uncle, it's me. Diep is here." A sudden shuffle sounds from inside. Uncle steps out, his weathered face brightening with genuine surprise and joy. "Diep, oh my goodness, child. It's been ages. Come in, come in." His voice wraps around her like a warm blanket, and Diep forces a small smile through trembling lips. "Yes, Uncle. It's been a long time," she manages to say before he pulls her into a tight embrace. For a few seconds, Diep closes her eyes, letting the warmth sink into her cold, exhausted heart. When they pull apart, Uncle studies her face closely. "How have you been? Work is all right? You're eating well?" Diep nods quickly, hiding the fatigue behind her eyes. "Yes, Uncle. I'm healthy. Work is manageable." She tries to sound upbeat, but her voice betrays her, trembling despite her efforts. Uncle doesn't push further. Instead, he gestures excitedly. "Come inside. You suddenly show up today. What a blessing. I was just thinking about you yesterday." Diep blushes faintly. "I'm sorry I haven't visited. I've been swamped with work. And when I heard James mention you before, I thought I should come see you." Uncle laughs, loud and hearty, as he leads her into the living room. "You've grown prettier, you know that? I'm really happy to see you safe and well." Diep sits down on the wooden bench, cradling the glass of water Uncle hands her, as if it might give her strength. The moment feels warm, comforting, but deep inside, she feels something fragile cracking. Memories of the past few weeks pass through her mind like a silent storm. Running from danger, hiding in the deep forest, nights spent shaking in fear. Everything she had tried to forget now presses on her chest again. Still, having Uncle here, listening, grounding her, it makes her feel safe in a way she hasn't felt in a long time. They chat for a while, laughter threading in between the quiet pauses. Then the conversation dips into heavier waters. "Diep," Uncle asks gently, "after the chase that night, what happened to you? Where did you go? You vanished for so long." Diep's fingers tighten around the cup. Her voice wavers. I didn't know where I was running. I just ran. I was lost for days, maybe a week, maybe more." Her throat tightens. Her eyes sting. If James hadn't contacted me, I don't know what would have happened. A lot of people were searching for me. When we finally reunited, I thought everything was going to be okay. Uncle reaches across the table and squeezes her hand, his eyes glimmering with emotion. Thank goodness you're safe now. I was so worried, child. Diep forces a small smile. I'm okay. I really am. I even brought you something. She picks up the little basket she prepared earlier. These are tangerines from the garden and a few boxes of cake for the baby. Uncle's laughter returns, booming and heartfelt. You're such a thoughtful girl. Thank you. For a moment, the air feels light again. But inside Diep, another emotion slowly rises. Loneliness. Something that has shadowed her every step lately. Uncle asks about her new home. James mentioned he built a house for you. Did you finish moving in? Diep nods softly. Yes, Uncle. It's nearby. I'd love for you to visit. Uncle's eyes sparkle. Does it have a chicken coop? James said something about that. Yes, she replies with a faint laugh. But I haven't bought any chickens yet. Uncle stands up immediately. Then take a pair home. I have extra. Raise them. They'll keep you company. Diep waves her hands in embarrassment. No, Uncle. I just came to visit. I can't take your chickens. But Uncle insists, placing 2 chickens into a small basket and pushing it toward her. Take them. Think of them as us lending them to you. One day, when they grow big, you can cook a chicken feast for us. Diep laughs for real this time, a soft little sound that cracks open the heaviness in her chest. All right, Uncle. Then I'll borrow them. She stands and hugs him tightly, whispering, Thank you. It's more than just gratitude for the gifts. It's gratitude for the warmth, the familiarity, the feeling of belonging she hasn't felt since James disappeared from her world. Uncle walks her to the gate. Come back soon, Diep. Don't disappear again. Diep nods, her eyes misty. I will. As she walks back toward her new home, the sky shifts into a deep amber, and the village breeze brushes against her cheeks like a gentle reminder that she is still here, still breathing, but carrying a heart heavier than anyone around her realizes. When Diep reaches the new house James built, silence wraps around her like a cold veil. She opens the chicken coop's little door, sets the 2 chickens inside, and whispers, This is your new home. The chickens flap and chirp happily, exploring their new surroundings. But Diep doesn't smile this time. She stands quietly, her gaze distant, her voice barely audible as she murmurs, James isn't here. I don't even feel like living anymore. The new house is beautiful. Warm colors, spacious rooms, sunlight pouring through the large windows. But to her, it feels empty, like a shell, like a place built for 2, now inhabited by 1. She sits on the front steps, runs her fingers through one of the chicken's soft feathers, and lets her thoughts scatter. Where is James? Why hasn't he called? Why is she facing everything alone? Fear knots in her stomach, tight and suffocating. Night slowly falls, wrapping the village in deep blue shadows. Inside the quiet house, Diep dials James again, hands trembling violently. The dial tone rings once, twice, 3 times. Then a flat, cold female voice cuts through the silence. The subscriber you are trying to reach is currently unavailable. Diep's heart sinks. She tries again. Same message. She presses her forehead into her hands, breathing unevenly. James, where are you? She wipes her tears, but they spill again and again, unstoppable, like a dam breaking after weeks of holding itself together. At last, she gathers the courage and calls Mrs. Huyen. Hello, Auntie. It's Diep. I can't reach James. I'm scared something happened. Mrs. Huyen responds gently. Oh, Diep, don't worry too much. James is on a business trip, very far away. The signal there is terrible. He's also busy meeting clients. He'll call you in a few days. Diep tries to steady her breath. Yes, I was just frightened. They chat briefly. Mrs. Huyen reassures her again and again before ending the call. But even after the phone goes silent, Diep feels no peace. She curls up on the bed, clutching her pillow, letting silent tears soak into the fabric. Her thoughts spin endlessly. Fear, longing, emptiness, exhaustion. I miss you, James. The oil lamp flickers softly in the corner, its fragile light barely illuminating the room. And in that dim glow, Diep's heart breaks and mends at the same time. Fragile, aching, but still holding on. The night deepens, folding over the village like a heavy blanket. Outside Diep's window, crickets hum in the darkness, their soft rhythm echoing through the quiet house. But inside, Diep lies awake, staring at the ceiling with swollen eyes, her fingers still curled around her phone, as if it were the only lifeline she had left. Hours pass. The clock ticks. The wind brushes the bamboo grove. Yet James's phone remains silent. Eventually, exhaustion drags her into a restless sleep, filled with blurry dreams. James calling her name. James reaching out. James fading into the fog before she can touch him. When dawn finally breaks, a pale gray light washes over the house. Diep wakes with a start, heart pounding, as if she had been running miles in her dreams. She sits up quickly and checks her phone again. No missed calls, no messages, nothing. Her chest tightens with a sharp ache. James, please, where are you? She presses a hand to her forehead, trying to breathe through the rising anxiety. She drags herself out of bed and splashes her face with cold water at the bathroom sink. The reflection staring back at her looks unfamiliar. Eyes red, shoulders slumped, spirit dim. As she steps out into the yard, the chicken's uncle gave her chime in with soft chirps, running in circles around her feet. Diep forces a small smile, kneeling down to scatter some feed for them. Eat up. I promised Uncle I'd take good care of you. But her smile disappears as quickly as it forms. Because without James, even the smallest tasks feel unbearably heavy. Holding her phone tightly, she dials for what feels like the 100th time. Rings, rings. Then the same cold message. Subscriber unavailable. Her knees weaken. She sinks down under the tangerine tree, covering her face as tears spill again. Why can't I reach you? Did I do something wrong? Are you hurt? Are you avoiding me? James, please don't disappear from my life. Hours later, she decides she can't sit still any longer. Her emotions swirl. Fear, sadness, helplessness, until she feels suffocated. She grabs her motorbike key and rides straight toward Uncle's house, craving a familiar voice, someone to talk to before the loneliness swallows her whole. When she arrives, Uncle is sweeping the yard. He stops immediately when he sees her pale face. Diep, child, what happened? You look like you've been crying all night. Diep's voice breaks the moment she opens her mouth. Uncle? She tries to smile but fails. I'm sorry to bother you. I needed to see someone. Without another word, Uncle puts down the broom and gently guides her inside. Sit down. Tell me everything. Diep sits on the bench, gripping her hands tightly until her knuckles turn white. And then, like a dam bursting, the words spill out. Uncle, I can't contact James. For days. His phone is always off. I've called again and again. Her voice cracks. I'm scared. I'm really scared. I don't know if he's okay, or if he just doesn't want to talk to me anymore. Her tears fall freely now, dripping onto her hands. Uncle's face softens with concern. Did you talk to his mother? Diep nods weakly. She said he's on a business trip far away. Busy. The signal is bad. But Uncle, I know James. Even if he worked all night, even if he was tired, he would still call me. He would text me. He would say something. Anything. Her voice drops to a whisper. But now, nothing. Uncle sighs deeply and sits beside her. Diep, listen to me. You have been through a lot. Danger, fear, trauma. All of that leaves wounds you can't see. When you care for someone deeply, even a little silence becomes unbearable. Diep wipes her tears, but more follow. I feel like I can't breathe without him, Uncle. Every time I call and it doesn't go through, I feel like the world is collapsing. Uncle nods slowly. You love James. That's why it hurts. But crying alone won't solve anything. Diep shakes her head, voice trembling. It's not just love. It's everything. James saved my life. He built my home. He is my strength. When I can't reach him, I feel like I'm losing my reason to live. Uncle grips her shoulders firmly, turning her to face him. Diep, look at me. You have to stay strong. James wouldn't want to return and find you like this. He wouldn't want you to collapse just because he's gone for a few days. Diep sobs harder. But I'm so tired, Uncle. I don't want to eat. I can't sleep. I feel like my heart is breaking. Uncle pulls her into a tight embrace, patting her back gently. Cry if you must. Let it out. But don't lose yourself. Your life doesn't end because someone isn't beside you right now. She clings to him and cries silently, letting all the grief she has been holding in for days pour out. For a long time, Uncle just sits with her, letting her cry, offering the quiet comfort of someone who truly cares. When she finally calms down a little, Uncle hands her a glass of warm water. Drink this. Your body needs strength. You cannot fall apart. Diep takes a sip, trembling. Uncle, do you think James will come back soon? Uncle nods reassuringly. He will. He's a responsible man, and he loves you. Give him time. Trust him. Diep closes her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. I'm trying. I really am. But every hour feels like a year. Uncle gently lifts her chin. Diep, you must live your life. Eat. Rest. Take care of the home he built for you. Take care of yourself. When he comes back, he needs to see the girl he loves. Strong, alive, waiting. Diep nods slowly, wiping her face. She inhales shakily. I'll try, Uncle. I'll try to be strong. Uncle smiles warmly. Good girl. and you're not alone. Come here anytime you need to talk. Diep feels some of the heaviness ease. Not entirely, but enough for her to breathe again. Enough for her to stand. She hugs Uncle tightly before leaving. Thank you, Uncle. You saved me today. As she rides home, the sky opens into a light drizzle. Raindrops tapping softly against her helmet. The world looks gray, muted, fragile, just like her heart.